Shalom. All praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua, Ba'ashem Achakodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of GMS to give us his truth and Holy Spirity. And salutations to all you occupation this word throughout the four corners of the earth in sincerity and in truth. I'm the brother Yahweh, and this lesson will be going into a document that I found by using ChatGPT, AI. I asked it for some evidence of Hebrew in the Americas, which it pulled up a few that we know of, such as, let's look that up, the Los Lunas Stone. This is in New Mexico. And right here, as you can see, this is ancient Paleo-Hebrew in New Mexico, which proves that the natives, the so-called natives and Hispanics, they spoke Hebrew. This is ancient Hebrew. Why would the Indians speak ancient Hebrew? That's because they're the lost tribes of Israel. And you got guys that still saying that all 12 tribes are Negroes. You out your damn mind. How can you explain this then? And there's another one called Newark Holy Stones. Yep, right here, as you can see, this is the Newark Holy Stones. This is supposed to be Moses in the middle, and around it, as you can see, is Assyrian Hebrew. And this was passed down from generations of Native Americans. This is one of them. But it says, what does the keystone say? It says, law of the Lord, word of the Lord, holy of holies, king of the earth. So that shows that the natives, they worshipped the Most High, the God of the Bible. And as you can see right here is Assyrian Hebrew on it, right? So that's just two. But one of the ones ChatGPT told me about, which I didn't know, is about this one called the Paraíba stone. Now, this is very interesting because this story right here proves that, it proves the scriptures. It proves that King Solomon existed. It proves that a Hiram Abiff written of in the scriptures existed, because this is a text of the Canaanites, the Phoenicians that came to the Americas, because they were part of King Solomon's navy. They came here every year and a half to 2 years, to get gold and, different animals, and brought it back to King Solomon, right? And that's how the Native Americans knew that there was another land where never mankind dwelt, like the scriptures say, which is the Americas. That's how they knew when they were leaving the Assyrian captivity that there was another land, where they would leave the multitude of the people, in the east, and then go west, So reading that reading that passage in the scriptures is how Christopher Columbus knew there was people on this side of the earth, which is why he brought 5 Hebrew interpreters with him to speak to the Native Americans, So this is the text here. It's called the Paraíba stone when you look it up. And, you might have to type in Paraíba stone in Hebrew. And you'll find it, because when you type it in now, Paraíba stone, this is what's going to pop up, the precious stone. Because, Esau, being the devil that he is, he going to try to hide the truth, So let me get this scripture. This is 1 Kings chapter 9, verse 27. Verse 26, it says, and King Solomon made a navy of ships in Ezion-Geber, which is beside Eloth, on the shore of the Red Sea and the land of Edom. Now, we got to see what this is speaking about. So here's a map of the Middle East. And, see that it's pinned over there, Ezion-Geber. And this is Eloth. So around this region, in the Gulf of Aqaba, the Gulf of Aqaba, which, that's part of the Red Sea too. They're connected. But in that region is where Solomon had a port, had his navy, So I'm going to go back to it. It says, And Hiram sent in the navy his servants, shipmen that had knowledge of the sea, with the servants of Solomon. So Hiram Abiph's servants, they had knowledge of the seas. They were very wise in, navigation and, traveling the oceans. It says, and they came to Ophir and fetched from thence gold 420 talents and brought it to King Solomon. So Ophir is America. If we look it up, where is Ophir in the Bible? Well, it says likely somewhere. They say, wait, yeah, yep. The Bible doesn't pinpoint the exact location of Ophir, but is generally understood to be a source of gold and other valuable items for King Solomon, likely somewhere south or southeast of Palestine. But they don't know. They just speculating. But Ophir is America, and we're going to prove that. So it says, and they came to Ophir, fetched from thence gold 420 talents, and brought it to King Solomon. Now let's get the next chapter, 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 27. It says, no, that's not it. Okay, 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 21. And all King Solomon's drinking vessels were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver. It was nothing accounted of in the days of Solomon. Yeah, because King Solomon, he was the richest man to ever live on earth. He was getting a lot of wealth from his navy coming to the Americas and getting all that gold, as well as the heathens that worshiped him, that brought him gifts, such as, the Queen of Sheba and many other kings all over the earth, were subject to Solomon. They brought him tribute and then they brought in gifts, But the gold of Ophir is America, because America is, America's full of gold. That's one of the main reasons why greedy Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, came to this side of the earth. When they came here, the so-called natives, gold was nothing to them. You had gold in the rivers, they had gold, like it's a regular thing, and Esau saw that and he envied, and he came here and enslaved them and, damn near wiped them out with the harsh labor that he put them under to dig for the gold, chopping off their hands, This is the type of things the so-called white man has done, But America's gold is, what's the word I'm looking for, is was always coveted, the gold of the Americas. So verse 22 says, for the king had a navy of Tarshish with the navy of Hiram. Once in 3 years came the navy of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver, ivory and apes and peacocks. Yeah, so, Solomon had that navy with Hiram Abiff, right? And once every 3 years, which the scriptures go into. Matter of fact, now let's get that. In 2nd Ezra chapter 13, verse is it 30 or 40? Let's see. Yeah, 40. This is 2nd Ezra chapter 13, verse 40. Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea, the king, whom Salmanassar, the king of Assyria, led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. Now the 10 tribes is the northern kingdom of Israel, which is the so-called Hispanics and Native Americans. You have 2 kingdoms of the nation of Israel. You have the northern kingdom, which is the 10 tribes, and then you have the southern kingdom, which is, Judah is the head tribe is part of that. It's known as the kingdom of Judah. The northern kingdom, the 10 tribes, is known as the kingdom of Israel. And then the southern kingdom is known as the kingdom of Judah, which consists of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. So the 10 tribes are the 10 lost tribes, that came to the Americas. So they came to another land, which is going into when the king of Assyria came to Israel and took the tribes, enslaved them, and brought them back to their land, Assyria. It says, but they took this counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt. So they would go into another country where never mankind dwelt, which is America. So after captivity, they decided to go away from the heathens, and it's going to tell you why. It says that they might dare keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. Yeah, so they went to the Americas. They left the east side of the world, so that way they don't get tainted by the way of the heathens, because that's always been an issue between the Most High and Israel, is the fact that Israel always followed the customs of the heathens. And the Most High, time and time and time again throughout the scriptures, warned us about doing that and the punishment that would come with doing it. So they decided, let's just leave the heathens so that way we don't get tainted, go into a further country where never mankind dwelt, right? Which is the Americas. There was nobody here dwelling here before the so-called Native Americans, man. So it says, but they took this counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might dare keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into Euphrates by the narrow passages of the river. For the Most High then shewed signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely 1.5 years, and the same region is called Arsareth. Then dwelt they there unto the latter time, now when they shall begin to come. So they went through that region, right, around the Horn of Africa, and went into a further country where never mankind dwelt, which is the Americas. And the journey took about 1.5 years, which is about how long it takes to get from there to the Americas, without the modern boats, of course. Now you got ships that can make it here way faster. But back then, that's how long it took, about 1.5 years, you see? So, they knew that because what? They knew the story of King Solomon and his navy, and they knew about Ophir, which is the Americas. So it says the region is called Arsareth. Now, when we look up Arsareth, let's see what it says right here. Matter of fact, let's do this. Arsareth, Columbus. Let's see. Arsareth just means another land, as you can see. I'm looking for the part about Christopher Columbus, because Christopher Columbus, he said that Arsareth is the Americas. Matter of fact, let's put Arsareth with a S. Arsareth, Columbus. Okay, well, they got this book on Amazon. This is probably an Israelite brother or sister. They got this book because it says right here, the name of the land beyond the great river. Christopher Columbus used the Bible to find the Americas. Let's see. Damn, man. Before you could just look it up and it'll say Christopher Columbus identified America with Arsareth. But hey, man, Esau, over the years, he's monitored us, watched our videos, and seen, the different sources that brothers use, different things brothers look up, and he done switch it up. Just like with YouTube. Before on YouTube, you used to be able to find things easily, by yep. We got these brothers right here, America's Osiris, But before you could just look it up, and it says Christopher Columbus identified America with Osiris. Identify America, Osiris. Let's look that up. Hey, wow. Before it was just easy to just find. But yeah, let me just go to this website. Let's see. Oh boy. Okay. It says Esdras, Osiris, and the Lost 10 Tribes. One of the Apocrypha is known as Esdras. It is Latin and is found in some Catholic and other Bibles. But let's see. Okay, yep, and it goes into the verses we read. Let's see. What did it talk about? Columbus. Okay, all right, this is the source right here. Okay, there you go. Osiris by Morris Jestro, Kaufman Kohler, and it gives you the source right here. I figure let's go to it. Okay, it doesn't talk about, oh, let's see. Yep, there you go. It says, the name of the land beyond the great river, far away from the habitation of man, in which the 10 tribes of Israel will dwell, observing the laws of Moses, until the time of the restoration, which we're in right now. According to 2nd Ezra 13 and 45, Columbus identified America with this land. So Christopher Columbus, he knew where he was going because he read 2nd Ezra the 13th chapter. And we read it, how it said that they might dwell there until the time of restoration, So, we're in that time now. This is the reason why the Most High brought him to this side of the earth, because the deliverance will come from America, And then later on, the Most High used this devil to bring in the southern kingdom, by the way of captivity, the so-called Negroes, So now you got all 12 tribes on here in America. This is why America is known in the scriptures as spiritual Egypt, because the ancient Egyptians had the 12 tribes in bondage, right? So now let's go to this article speaking about the stone, the Paraíba inscription. It's a 6th century BC Phoenician Masonic script of the Merchant King and King Hiram. And the website is gnosticwarrior.com. It says, the Paraíba stone inscription is a script of Phoenician text dated to approximately the 6th century BCE that was found in Paraíba, the easternmost state of Brazil. The text tells of Phoenician Masonic merchant king and King Hiram, who is called Tyrian King Hiram III, 554 to 533 BCE in the text. The Paraíba inscription also mentions the Sidonian Canaanites, who are also known as the Phoenicians, who set sail around Africa and ended up on the shores of Brazil during the 19th century of the reign of King Hiram, some 500 years BC. The stone was said to be found in 1872 by slaves on a plantation of a man named Joaquim Alves da Costa, which is an Edomite. He had, so-called Negro and so-called native slaves, working on his plantation. And, they were removing stones, and then he found the inscription on it. And, he had his son draw the inscription and send it to some expert to see if they knew what it was, and that's how they end up finding out that it's Phoenician. That's the story behind it. But it says, here's the complete Paraíba stone translation. It says, we are the children of Canaan, from Sidon of the eastern kingdom, of merchants in our castes. I pray here beside a central land of mountains, With this offered choice gift to the Most High gods and goddesses in the year 19 of King Hiram, I pray still strong from the valley of Ezion Gibber of the Red Sea. And we just read that, we read Ezion Gibber, King Solomon's navy that he had with Hiram, so Hiram's servants and King Solomon's servants, to make it to Arsareth or Orphair in the Bible. It says, thereby we journeyed with 10 ships, and we were at sea together assuredly 2 years around the land of Ham. Yeah, so as we read, that journey took about a year and a half to 2 years. They went with 10 ships around the land of Ham, which is Africa. So that's how you get all around Africa, right? It says, and we were at sea together surely 2 years around the land of Ham. We were separated by the hand of Baal, and no longer remain among our companions. I pray, we have come here, 12 men and 3 women at this new land. Devoted I make, even whom men of wealth bowed the knee, a pledge to the Most High gods and goddesses with sure hope. And it says the Phoenicians sailing to the Americas to places such as Brazil and colonizing the area is by no means a new idea, and it has been written about by many experts over the last few hundred years. In the Rio de Janeiro National Museum, there are said to be tombstones with Phoenician, Syriac, and Sanskrit inscription that were found in the Brazilian countryside. So right there, that shows you that, the Bible is true, that history about the Phoenicians, Hiram Abiff, them coming over here. And then later on, our people, the lost 10 tribes, they made it to this side of the earth because they knew about that history, because King Solomon's servants went with Hiram Abiff's servants, and they both had that knowledge, So it says a famous Danish scholar, Dr. Peter Lorne, had said that the Phoenicians contributed the formation of pre-civilization in Brazil. Let me add that Dr. Lorne is considered the father of Brazilian paleontology as well as archaeology. And this is why you got the Olmec heads all over the Americas. It's because the Phoenicians, they came to the Americas and basically left their images behind. And when you look at the images, of course, they look like Hamites, so-called Africans, Yep. Hamites, man. You see? So they came to the Americas and they left monuments behind, So it says ancient history of Brazil, 1100 BC to 1500 AD. He has spent years studying the subterranean parts of the hidden treasures of the land that exist near the village of Toro, where the Phoenician navigators were said to have anchored after roaming about 10 kilometers of a canal. Professor Schwinnigan concluded that he found Phoenician inscriptions in the Amazon in which there were references to many kings of Zidon and Tyre, 887 to 856 BC. Matter of fact, let's see what that link got. Oh, wow. Yeah, we're going to have to get into that but some other time. Wow. Yeah, I got to read that. Yep. So let me go back. Hey, where is it at? Oh, here it is. Yep. It says, Schwinnigan believes that the Phoenicians used Brazil as a base for at least 800 years, contributing to the culture among the natives, such as Brazilian Indians, known as Carajas and Carajás. And the etymology of the words, they are clearly of Phoenician Hebrew origin and can also be found in today's Arabic language, which descended from the Hebrew. It has been discovered, just like in North American Indian tribes, and language that the Brazilian Indian tribes, such as the Guaranis, the Tupis, and the Guaraharas, the Chambicas, the Anajas, the Carillos, etc., have in their vocabulary thousands of Arabian words whose origin is Phoenician, because Arabian, Arabic, and Phoenician, they're all languages that descended from the Hebrew. It says, even though there is extensive evidence that the Phoenician had colonized Brazil and an army of experts willing to back these facts up, the Paraíba text had garnered a tremendous amount of controversy, with many experts contending its authenticity, contending it is authentic, and others who seem to be hell-bent on supporting the mainstream historic narrative claim that it is fake. This battle of experts always seems to occur when an ancient artifact is found that tears down the current historical foundation built up upon upon the sins of lies. That's right. Esau is a liar, man. The so-called white man, his whole history is a lie, man. History is written by the victors, and the so-called white man has been victorious for the past 6 centuries, man. So of course he gonna change shit up to fit his narrative, you know? When they make those movies about the ancient Egyptians and ancient civilizations, it's always so-called white people in there, man. And they'll throw in some Arabs up in there, to make you think that, yeah, if they weren't white, then they were Arabs, but they weren't so-called black. But historically speaking, biblically speaking, scientifically speaking, ancient peoples were dark-skinned, man. The Arabs were black before. The Chinese were black before. Everybody was dark skinned, and that they range, with within different shades of the brown, dark brown to a light brown. But for the main part, they were darker until the so-called white man came in as, started with the Greeks and then the Romans, but mainly during colonialism, where they did so much raping of the peoples that they lightened them up. And with him being in power, Esau, the so-called white man, the people of the earth, they wanted to be like Esau. So over time, it's always among those heathens, they made it desirable to have lighter skin. So you're not dark skin, you just a light brown. The closer you are to Esau's shade, light color, the better you are. When you go to India, all these different nations, they basically bred themselves to be lighter, because that's what is desirable in Esau's world, But in ancient times, they were mainly dark skinned. So it says, after my own personal research into the matter, I believe that the Paraíba inscription is in fact real, and the facts in this article that are supported by some of the world's best Phoenician and Hebrew scholars, and also the many other articles I have done on Phoenician, let's see. It says, for example, an expert on Semitic languages in Phoenician Hebrew, Dr. Cyrus Hurls Gordon, 1908 to 2001, head of the Department of Mediterranean Studies, It says, he concluded that it is obvious that the text is genuine. He is well known for his translations of the ancient Cretan Linear A script as Semitic and published hundreds of orthodox papers, and at the time there was no one in the world who was more knowledgeable than him. Here was Gordon's translation of the text. We are Sidonian Canaanites from the city of Mercantile King. We were cast up on this distant shore, a land of mountains. We sacrificed a youth to the celestial gods and goddesses in the 19th year of our mighty king Hiram, and embarked from Ezion Gibber into the Red Sea. We voyaged with 10 ships and were at sea together for 2 years around Africa, Ham. Then we were separated by the hand of Baal and were no longer with our companions. So we have come here, 12 men and 3 women, into New Shore. Am I the admiral, a man who would flee? Nay, may the celestial gods and goddesses favor us well. It says Dr. Gordon was also an expert on the infamous Bat Creek stone in the United States of the Americas from Tennessee, which that stone has Hebrew on it as well. He had concluded that it was not an example of 19th century Native American script, but rather written in Phoenician. Modifying the claims, he supposed the characters to be Hebrew letters from after the Second Jewish War, based on similarities with Maccabean coin inscriptions and letter forms from Qumran. Yeah, man, so you see Esau, he has the truth. He knows the truth. This is why the scriptures call him Lucifer, the light bearers. They know, you know, they know the world history, they know biblical history, they know all that shit, man. You know? That's why the scriptures say he's wiser than Daniel. Let's get that. This is Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 3. It says, Behold, thou art wiser than Daniel. There is no secret that they can hide from thee. That's right. So Esau is wiser than Daniel, and he searching all things, man. It says, There is no secret that they can hide from thee. With thy wisdom and with thine understanding, that has gotten thee riches and has gotten gold and silver into thy treasures. And this is how Esau was able to get to the level that he's at now. They came out of the caves, and they plotted to take down Israel because they knew the prophecy of them ruling over the earth. The prophecy of Genesis 25, Genesis 27, telling Esau that he would have the fatness of the earth. This is why when they came to the Americas, they called it manifest destiny, which means prophecy fulfilled. So they knew they were fulfilling their prophecies in the scriptures about Esau, Edom. The scriptures say Esau would be the end of the world and Jacob will be the beginning of the world to come. So they knew what they was doing, man. Christopher Columbus, when you look up the movie 1492, they show you that he mentioned Esdras. When the priest asked him, how does he know that there is another land? He mentioned some other people and he said Esdras. And then the dude said Esdras was a Jew, So he read 2nd Esdras, the 13th chapter, to know the Israelites was dwelling here. And he actually had a letter to the Queen of Spain where he basically talked about, how he's gonna conquer Jerusalem or something like that. He said that in his letter, so he knew what he was doing, man. He wasn't just trying to go to India. He got lost and then found the Americas. That's the bullshit story that they tell people. He knew he was conquering the Israelites. That's why he brought the Hebrew interpreters with him, because he knew. You see, so he knew about this land being full of gold and riches that made Solomon rich. So this is why he was sent here as an inquisition. And then went back to say, yo, with just 50 men, we could subdue the whole island of Hispaniola, and then slaughtered millions and millions and millions of people, man. Right? So that's how he got his riches and his gold and treasures. It says, by thy great wisdom and by thy traffic has thou increased thy riches, and thine heart is lifted up because of thy riches. That's right. So your traffic, man, your trade, you're able to, trade with the rest of the world. The rest of the world became rich because of America. The scriptures talk about America being Babylon and how America made the whole earth rich. Revelation, the 18th chapter, the nations basically sold their goods here. America is only 4% of the earth's population, yet they control about 1/3 of the global spending, on goods, So America is rich, man, because Esau knew about the scriptures, right? But yeah, that's it on that. Now let's get is deep. This is Psalms chapter 64, verse 6. It says, they search out iniquities, they accomplish a diligent search. That's what Esau does. The so-called white man, he pays for studies, man. He spends billions and billions and billions of dollars on studies and archaeology to try to see if the Bible is true. And every time, the Bible always gets proven to be right, And Israel, they always discovering stuff, backing up the scriptures. Random places all over the earth, some will pop up that'll relate to the scriptures, and Esau will prove that it's right, So they do a diligent search. It says, both the inward thought of every one of them and the heart is deep. Yeah, because these elites, these, high-level Edomites, they know what's going on, man. They know that we're the Israelites, They know that they're the Edomites. They know that there's a battle between us, the battle of good and evil. They know that the Mosai and his son, they're so-called black men. They know about the chariots, the so-called UFOs. They know about all of that, man. You know, and there was this other one. Yep, there it is. This one right here. This is called, I think it's called Michigan Relics or something like that, which was found in the Americas. And as you can see here in the stone, this is pretty much the story of the flood. The story of the flood. You got chariots on top, and then you got people getting flooded by the rain. And then you got Noah's Ark, and after the Ark, you see the animals stepping off the Ark, and the people rejoicing, man. But as usual, Esau always calls them, oh yeah, they're fake, they're a hoax, because it destroys his narrative. It destroys the lies that he's been telling, And if they were true, which they are, that would mean that they conquered the children of Israel, And the average mind, the average Edomite, they can't begin to digest that. Because if we're the children of Israel, then that means America is the new Egypt, and it will get plagued by the Most High. That would mean that you angered the Most High for enslaving his chosen people, So this devil, he knows, man. He's wiser than Daniel, and his heart is deep. Now let's go. Matter of fact, let's get Revelation first. Revelation chapter 20, verse. This is Revelation chapter 20, verse 7. It says, and when 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. Now that 1,000 years is going into the dark ages, the period where so-called black men, the southern kingdom of Israel, ruled all of Europe. You look up all the images of the Moors, of the royalty, the descriptions of the first-hand witnesses, the paintings, the statues from that period, and they're all black, so-called black people, man. So how do we go from Europe being black to Europe being Edomites now? That's because of the Renaissance. The so-called white man, came out of the caves, and once they got power and the papacy, which is the papacy, the Pope, that seat. Once they got power over the Vatican, that's when, their power was established, and they went all over Europe and, committed genocide on the so-called blacks that was there, and enslaved the rest of them and exiled some of them to Africa, to West Africa, and other parts of the earth. It was a persecution against our people. A lot of those revolutions that happened in Europe was so-called white men coming up against Jake rulership, man. So that's a 1,000-year period, which is when the Roman Empire fell from 300 something AD all the way to the late 1300s. That's a 1,000-year period. So after that, it says Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, which Satan is the so-called white man. They were loosed out of that, state they was in. They were cavemen, They were poor. They were our servants, our slaves. They couldn't get from under that predicament. Just like how we in slavery, ever since slavery, and we're still in slavery to this day, we still can't get from under the hands of the so-called white man's oppression. So it was the same thing with the so-called white man. So he got loosed out of his prison and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is at the sand of the sea. So after he was loosed, he went to deceive the earth. Let's get the 12th chapter, Revelation chapter 12, verse. I'm going to start at 7. It says, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels. Yeah, so this is going into what? Space war, where you're going to have the Heavenly Father's only begotten Son, Yahushua, along with the angels and the so-called UFOs, making war against the so-called white man's armies, his space force. You know, that's what it's going into. The dragon is going into the system, the Edomite empire. You know, it says, and his angels is a space force, and prevail not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. Yeah, they're gonna get cast out of heaven. That's why it says that in Isaiah 14, how thou fallen from heaven, Lucifer, son of the morning. The light bearers, the bearers of the light, the Illuminati, the elites. They know where the Israelites, they know that the Edomites, they know the prophecies, man. And they're making preparations to fight against Yahweh Shah because they know he's coming back to save the children of Israel, just like how he came and saved Israel and Egypt, and ancient Egypt. You see, it says, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Yeah, so he deceived the whole world. That's why he's known as the devil. Devil means deceiver, man. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 25, verse 7. It says, and he will destroy in this mountain the face of the cover and cast over all people, and the veil that is spread over all nations. Yeah, man, this mountain is America, this government. The face of the cover and cast over all people. That veil that is spread over all nations is going into the so-called white man, blinding the people, blinding them from darkening their eyes from them seeing the light, changing history, changing nationalities, telling people, you're not a Moabite, you're Chinese. Oh, you're not East Indian. You're not Elamite. You're East Indian, or you're African, when he knows damn well they're the Hamites. Or us, the children of Israel, calling us blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, knowing damn well we're the Israelites. And then he calls himself white, which means pure, clean, holy, when he knows damn well he's the devil, the Edomite, right? Satan. So that's the veil that is spread upon all nations. This is 2 Ezra chapter 6, verse 27. It says, for evil shall be put out and deceit shall be quenched. Yeah, so deceit is being quenched through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Shah, through the prophets. We're the ones bringing out the truth, calling out all the lies that the so-called white man has been telling the world for all these centuries, man. So it ain't working no more. At one point he was able to sweep shit under the rug, but all the truth is coming to light, man. You see? Yahweh Shah said, whatsoever is done in darkness shall be brought to the light. Their works are being exposed, man. All the deceit, all the lies, all the bloodshed, it's all being exposed, man. It says, as for faith, it shall flourish. Corruption shall be overcome. Yeah, faith is flourishing now through us, man. And corruption, which is these bodies, shall be overcome. We're going to overcome these bodies. We're going to overcome death through Yahweh Shah's blood, through the faith that we have in Yahweh Shah. It says, and the truth which had been so long without fruit shall be declared. So it's been a while that the truth wasn't out here, man. For centuries, the so-called white man, he got away with lying to the world. But now all the truth is coming to light. This is why information like that, is coming out, And then there's, many other information that proves we're the Israelites, man, So we don't need Esau validation, but, it's always good to see, because it's a faith booster, So, yeah, man, this is pretty much it on this lesson. I hope this was edifying. So with that, I'm going to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim Yashah, Bashim Chakodash. Double honors to the apostles of GMS that give us his truth and all the spirituality, and salutations to all y'all can push in this word. Shalom.